At 18, Iris Kessler had $29, a backpack with a broken buckle, and a dollar bid at a tax auction she had almost not attended. She had seen the notice in the window of the county building the week before. On the afternoon, she was walking downtown with nowhere particular to go, which described most of her afternoons since September. The notice listed the property as a commercial building, Main Street, delinquent taxes of $11,000, minimum bid $1, no reserve. She had written the date on the back of her hand in pen. On the morning of the auction, she had been the only person in the room besides the county clerk and a man in a yellow jacket who looked at his phone the whole time and did not bid. The clerk said, "Do I hear $1?" Iris raised her hand. Her grandmother Loretta had asked her to leave in September on a Sunday evening with the specific gentleness of someone who has been rehearsing an apology and still can't make it sound right. Ray had moved in July. He was 61 and had a truck and opinions about the house and the way Loretta ran it, and by August those opinions had expanded to include opinions about Iris. Loretta said it wasn't permanent. She said Iris could stay with her friend Dana. She said she'd send money when she could. She stood in the doorway of Iris's room and held on to the doorframe and did not quite meet Iris's eyes. Iris had packed the backpack. She had taken the $29 from her drawer, her savings from the summer, most of it, and she had hugged her grandmother, who held on for a moment too long, and she had walked down the stairs and out the front door. Dana's couch had lasted 3 weeks. Then Dana's mother needed the living room back. The shelter on 2nd Street was clean and had rules and a curfew of 9 o'clock. And Iris had been living there for 6 weeks when she saw the auction notice. She had, in those 6 weeks, developed the habit of walking. She walked in the mornings before the shelter woke up, and she walked in the evenings after dinner, and she walked past the diner on Main Street every time, because the diner was boarded and dark, and had been for 18 months, and she had eaten there once, when she was 16, on a Sunday morning when she had no money, and the woman behind the counter had told her the coffee was free on Sundays, and had brought her eggs without being asked. She had not known the woman's name. She had not gone back. She did not know why she kept walking past the building now, except that it was there, and it was dark, and something about that bothered her. The county clerk processed the deed transfer in 6 minutes. The building and the lot, 412 Main Street, were hers. The key was a skeleton type, which fit the front door and also the back, because Helen Sepiel had believed in simplicity wherever possible. Iris stood on the sidewalk in front of the boarded windows on a Wednesday morning in October and put the key in the lock and turned it. Inside was the smell of a place that has been closed for 18 months. Grease and old coffee, and something underneath, sweet, like the memory of pie. The booths were red vinyl, 4 of them, 2 on each side of the room. The counter ran the length of the back wall, 8 stools, the vinyl on 2 of them split. A pass-through to the kitchen. A pie case with a cracked glass door. A jukebox against the far wall that she could tell from the cord hadn't been plugged in years. A layer of fine dust on every horizontal surface. No broken windows. No water damage she could see. The building was sound. Behind the counter, on a hook below the pass-through, was an apron. White with blue piping, faded to near white in the wash, folded once across the hook the way a person folds an apron when they intend to come back to it. She stood in front of it for a while. Then she took it off the hook and tied it on. She spent the rest of the morning in the kitchen, gas line, pilot lights, the flat-top grill, the fryer, the reach-in cooler that needed a new thermostat seal. She was not a trained cook. She had been cooking since she was 12, for herself mostly, in the years when Loretta's attention was elsewhere. She understood a short-order kitchen, the way you understand something you have needed, rather than been taught. She noted what worked and what didn't. She made a list. That afternoon she started on the electrical. The outlet behind the counter had a loose connection. She could see the scorch mark on the outlet plate, and she got under the counter with a flashlight and a screwdriver to reach the wire from below. She was flat on her back, with her arm extended, when her hand found the plate. It was set into the underside of the toe kick, the kickboard that ran along the bottom of the counter facing the customer side. The plate was metal, maybe 10 by 14 inches, painted the same cream color as the toe kick, flush to the surface. But her fingers found its edge, and it was not part of the wood, it was a separate piece, and it had 2 recessed finger pulls on its near edge. She put both fingers in the pulls. She pulled. The plate swung down on a hinge, and below it, dropping away into the dark, was a stone-lined space. She went to the supply room for a better flashlight and came back and shone it down. The space was dry, the stones were dry, the earth floor was hard-packed. The air that came up was cool and smelled of minerals and age. Stone steps, 4 of them, going down maybe 3 feet. A root cellar from the building's first life, sealed over in the 1962 remodel when the diner went in. The access plate built into the counter's base and painted over and left. She went down. The space was roughly the size of a large closet, maybe 6 by 8 feet. The ceiling was the underside of the counter above. In the center of the earth floor, a metal cash box, the office supply kind with a carrying handle, sitting on a piece of oilcloth. Beside it, a composition book in a zip-seal bag. Beside that, a manila envelope, letter-sized, sealed, and under the cash box, she could see the corner of a document and a clear plastic sleeve. She sat down on the bottom step. She opened the composition book first. The cover said Sunday Log in marker. Inside, the first entry was dated April 3, 1971. The week the diner opened, she would calculate later. The format was simple. Date, name, or description, what they ordered. April 3, R. Holloway, alone coffee. April 10, woman with 2 children. Didn't give name, pie, page after page. 48 years of Sundays. Helen's handwriting getting slower in the later years, but never stopping. Iris read forward. She read the way you read something that is pulling you by the collar, fast, turning pages, stopping sometimes when a name repeated across years. There was a man named Morris who came every Sunday from 1974 to 2001, always alone, always ham and eggs, who stopped appearing after December 2001 and never came back. There was a family who appeared for 3 Sundays in a row in 1989 and then was gone, and Helen had written in the margin, hope they found somewhere better. There was Pat B., appearing every Sunday from the summer of 1992 through the final entry in September 2019, always coffee and eggs, always alone, always the same corner booth. She found her own name near the back. March 17, 2019, Iris K., 16, alone, didn't have money. Told her the coffee was free on Sundays. She ate 2 plates of eggs. She looked like someone who hadn't been looked after in a while. I should tell her she can always come here. I keep meaning to tell her. Iris stopped. She read it again. She sat in the stone cellar under the counter of a diner she had bought for $1 and read the entry 3 times, and then held the composition book flat against her chest with both hands and sat in the dark. Above her, the October rain had started. She could hear it on the roof of the building, and outside the town was doing what the town did in October, going about the business of a place where the mill had closed in 1987, and people had stayed anyway because they were from here, and here was what they had. She stayed on the step for a long time. She opened the cash box. Inside, bills, small ones, ones and fives and tens, banded in bundles, layered to the top. Coins in paper rolls. And on top of the first layer of bills, a piece of paper folded twice. Building fund. $1 per shift, 1971, 2019, for whoever keeps this place going. She counted the bundles. She didn't have to count the coins because they were rolled and labeled. When she was done, she sat with the adding machine tape in her hand. $22,847.13. $1 per shift across 48 years, set aside and never touched. She pulled the document from its plastic sleeve. It was a deed of gift, prepared on county forms, dated 2 years before Helen died, notarized, Helen Sepio, grantor. Iris Kessler, grantee. The property at 412 Main Street, Gallia County, Ohio. A blank where the filing date should have been, because Helen had died before filing it. Because the back taxes had come faster than she'd expected. Because things go wrong in the order they go wrong and there's nothing to be done about the order. Helen had known Iris's name. Helen had known her address. Helen had been planning this for 2 years. She held the deed in both hands. She set it on the oilcloth. She set the sealed envelope beside it. Not yet. Dewey Marsh arrived the next morning, no relation to Victor from Script 6, just a coincidence of surnames, at 7:30, with a cardboard box and a set of keys he said he'd held onto for 18 months, because he had a feeling. He was 71, a short man with a wide stance who moved around the kitchen with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. He had worked the grill at Helen's from 1988 to the last day she was open, and when she closed he had gone home and not worked since, which he said suited him fine except for the part where it didn't. He set the box on the counter. Inside, coffee cans, seasoning, a broken-in spatula he'd taken home the last day because he couldn't leave it there with nobody to use it. He said he hadn't thrown it away because that had felt like admitting something. He said Helen would have told him he was being dramatic. He said she was usually right about that kind of thing. He sat on a stool and drank the coffee Iris had made on the camp stove she'd brought from the shelter, and he talked about Helen Sepio the way people talk about someone they've worked beside for 30 years. Not the eulogy, the real version. The woman who showed up at 5 in the morning and never told anyone she'd been there before them. The woman who wrote forgiven in the tab ledger at the end of every year, in one column for every outstanding balance, because carrying the number forward accomplished nothing except making the book heavier. He said he had seen her feed people who couldn't pay so many times he had stopped counting and started considering it part of the job description. He said he'd come back tomorrow. He came back tomorrow and the day after. Ray Mutter arrived on the 9th day. He drove a company truck with a name on the door she didn't know, and he stood in the entrance of the diner and looked at the space the way men look at spaces they've already decided to convert. He was 61, neat, calm. He was wearing new boots that were wrong for the weather. He said he was sorry they were meeting under these circumstances. He said he had a business relationship with the council members who had approved the tax auction, and that he wanted to be transparent about that. He said there was a rezoning proposal coming before the city council in 3 weeks that would reclassify the Main Street corridor for mixed commercial development, and that under the new classification the building at 412 would be non-conforming use, and that he was prepared to offer her $40,000 for the lot, which was $29,000 more than the back taxes and $39,999 more than she had paid. He said he thought that was fair. He had the specific confidence of a man who has done this before and watched people take the money. He was not threatening her. He was offering her an exit. He believed, Iris understood, that an 18-year-old girl with $29 had no reason not to take $40,000 and walk away. She looked at him. It's not for sale. He waited a beat, the way people wait when they think the no is the first no and not the last one. I'd encourage you to think about what you're taking on here. I know what I'm taking on, Iris said. He set his card on the counter. He looked once more at the room. Then, he left. If you've made it this far into Iris's story, hit subscribe, because what Helen left under that counter is the part I've been waiting to tell you. The rezoning vote was in 3 weeks. Iris had 3 weeks, and the deed of gift, which her court-appointed attorney, a young woman named Gail who worked out of the legal aid office on 2nd Street, said was inoperative but not useless. She said it established intent. She said it demonstrated that the community had an interest in the property's continuity as a diner, which was a planning argument, not a legal one. She said it might work on the council, and it might not. Iris took the Sunday log to Councilwoman Pat Briggs's office on a Thursday afternoon. Pat Briggs was 66 and had represented the 3rd Ward for 12 years and had the expression of a woman who had heard every version of every argument and was prepared for another. Iris set the composition book on her desk without preamble and opened it to the page with the first Pat B. entry, summer of 1992. Coffee and eggs. She turned pages. Every Sunday. For 27 years. Pat B., alone, always the corner booth, always the same order. Pat Briggs looked at the log for a long time. She did not say anything. She turned to the last entry with her name in it, September 8, 2019, the week before Helen closed, and then she closed the book. She said, "Leave that with me." At the council meeting 2 weeks later, the rezoning vote was 3-2. Pat Briggs voted no. She did not explain her vote to the council. She looked at the agenda sheet in front of her and voted no. And that was all. Ray did not come back. That evening, Iris went back to the crawl space. She sat on the bottom step with the lantern she'd strung on a hook above the cellar and picked up the manila envelope. It was sealed with a single strip of tape. Her name was on the front in Helen's handwriting. Not Iris Kessler, just Iris. As though Helen had known she'd find it eventually, and formality wasn't required. Inside, a 3x5 index card. One side had her name. She turned it over. "This place kept me going. Now let it keep you going." 11 words. No date. No signature. Helen's handwriting. Smaller toward the end of the line, the way handwriting gets when you're trying to fit what you mean into the space you have. Iris held the card in both hands. She sat in the stone cellar under the counter of the diner. She did not move for a long time. The lantern put a circle of yellow on the stone wall. The rain had stopped, and the town was quiet, and 2 blocks over the Ohio River was doing what it always did, moving south in the dark, indifferent to the town it ran beside. She held the card against her chest. She sat until she was ready. Then she put the card in the pocket of Helen's apron and climbed the steps and closed the plate behind her and went to work. The grill fired on a Tuesday. Dewey was there when it happened. He'd replaced the igniter himself, a $20 part, and it lit with a sound like an intake of breath, the blue flame running the length of the flat top, and he stood there with his hands on his hips and looked at it and said, "All right." The reach-in cooler ran right once the thermostat seal was replaced. The pie case needed a new glass panel, which Iris ordered from a restaurant supply house in Columbus and installed herself with Dewey talking her through the frame. The jukebox she left silent for now, not because it couldn't be fixed, but because she wasn't ready for music yet. That would come. She posted in the county Facebook group that the diner at 4112 Main was being restored and would open in the spring. 47 people shared the post. 3 people she had never met knocked on the door the next day to ask if there was anything they could do. A woman brought cleaning supplies. A man with a van offered to haul the damaged furniture she'd pulled from the back storage room to the dump at no charge. A retired electrician named Bob fixed the wiring issue she'd found behind the counter for the cost of the materials and a cup of coffee from the camp stove. Iris added each of them to a list she was keeping in the back of her own composition book. A new one. Green cover, because she understood, reading Helen's log, that a diner is not a building. It is a record of the people who come through it. She started a tab system on the 3rd week. Not for everyone. For the people she could see were counting. She noted it in the green composition book the same way Helen had noted it. Name, date, amount, order. She did not write forgiven at the end of the year because she had not been open long enough to have a year yet. But she understood what the column was for. Toby knocked on the door on a Friday afternoon in November. He was 17, from the group home across the street, with the look of someone trying to appear less hungry than he was. He said the kitchen at the group home had been broken for 3 days, and nobody had filed the repair request, and he'd been living on vending machine chips, and he'd seen the light on in the diner and thought maybe. Iris was in the middle of inventory. She said, "Sit at the counter." She made him eggs and toast and a bowl of soup from the stock she'd started that morning. She set it in front of him and went back to her inventory. He ate without speaking. When he was done, he said he could wash dishes if she needed it. She said, "Come back Monday." He said, "I don't have money." She said, "I didn't ask about money." He came back Monday. He came back every day after school. He learned the dish station in a week. He was careful with the plates in a way that told her he understood, without being told, that breakage had a cost, and that he was someone for whom costs had always been real. She added him to the composition book under staff, which was a section she had just invented. Loretta came in on a Thursday in December. She came alone, without Ray, and she sat in the corner booth. Pat Briggs's booth, though Loretta didn't know that, and she didn't take off her coat and she didn't pick up a menu. She just sat. Iris saw her from the kitchen. She stood at the pass-through for a moment. Then, she poured a cup of coffee and carried it to the booth and set it down in front of her grandmother without saying anything. Loretta looked at the cup. She said, "I should have done better." Iris said, "Yes." She went back to the kitchen. Loretta sat in the booth until the coffee was gone, and then she left. She didn't leave money. Iris wrote her name in the green composition book anyway. The tab column was empty. She was working on what to put there. She found the entry in January. She had been going through Helen's original tab ledger, not the Sunday log, a different book. The daily accounts, cross-referencing it with the Sunday log to build a complete picture of what Helen had carried and forgiven across 48 years. Near the back of the tab ledger, in a section from 2017, was an entry she had missed on the first pass. The name was Gail Pruitt. The amount was $47.50. The date was a Wednesday in March. In the column at the right, forgiven. Gail Pruitt was Iris's attorney, the one from the legal aid office, the one who had argued the deed of gift before the council. Iris looked at the entry. Then she looked at the date, 2017, which meant Gail had been in here as a young woman. Maybe a law student, maybe just starting out. $47.50 on a Wednesday in March, tab forgiven. She put the ledger back. She added nothing to the green book. The next morning, Dewey arrived at 5:30, as he always did now, and started the coffee while Iris prepped the grill. Toby came in at 7 to open the dish station. At 8, the first customer of the day, a man named Carl who'd been coming in every morning since the second week. took his regular stool at the counter. Iris tied on Helen's apron. She turned to the grill. She looked at the window above the pass-through, and in the glass she could see the front of the diner reflected. The booths, the counter, the stools, the door, and through the door, the street outside, and across the street, the town going about its morning. She walked to the front. She stood at the door. She turned the open sign around.